When I was 10, my father, older sister, and I went to Walmart. My sister and I liked to wander off in the store, so my father bought us walkie-talkies. I was by myself in the bedding section, staring at a new bedspread, lost in thought, when a sudden chill crawled up my spine. It felt like eyes were on me. Slowly, I glanced toward the beginning of the aisle, and there he was, a hulking man with wild, greasy brown hair, his overalls stained with who knows what, just standing there, staring. His eyes locked on mine, unblinking. Heart pounding, I tried to stay calm. I turned and walked in the opposite direction, picking up the pace, heading toward the pet section. I grabbed the walkie-talkie, whispering into it, asking my dad where he was. Silence. No answer. My breath quickened. As I reached the dog food section, I felt safer with another shopper nearby. I peeked over my shoulder, hoping I'd lost him, and sighed in relief when he was nowhere in sight. I asked my dad again through the walkie-talkie, still nothing. Maybe it was over. But when I turned back around, my blood turned to ice. There he was again, standing at the end of the aisle, watching, just watching. I knew I had to get away, so I started walking faster, my plan to make it to customer service. But he mirrored my steps, moving in sync with me, blocking my path to the front of the store. My heart raced, panic rising in my chest. I turned, trying to lose him. In my 10-year-old mind, the bathroom seemed like a safe place to hide. I sprinted, ducking into a stall, closing the door as quietly as I could, hoping he hadn't followed. But then, I heard them, his heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate, entering the bathroom. I watched in horror as his worn, filthy boots appeared under the stall door. I held my breath, praying he'd leave. Just then, a voice rang out, sharp and furious. "Hey, get out of here, you pervert!" A woman's voice. She banged on the stall door. "Are you okay in there?" I opened the door, trembling, and fell into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She held me, promising it was okay, and walked me to the customer service desk, her grip tight on my hand, never letting go. She stayed with me until my father finally showed up. But even after I told him everything after she told him to, he didn't believe me. Now I'm 20, but this happened when I was 18. I'd moved to a new town where summers blazed at over 100 degrees every day. One afternoon, I found myself at Walmart again, doing some light shopping, needing a new pair of flip-flops. As I wandered the shoe aisle, a feeling of unease swept over me. I wasn't alone. An older man, late 30s or 40s, was standing nearby, his gaze lingering too long. His eyes were glassy, his movements jerky, like he was on something. He started muttering vile, disgusting things. I ignored him, used to the occasional catcall, and tried to brush it off. But then, he began to follow me, trailing behind as I moved through aisle after aisle. When I thought he was gone, I paid for my things and left the store, stepping out into the blistering heat. Walmart was part of a strip mall, and I needed to catch the bus at the other end. After about 20 seconds of walking, I saw him again, leaning against a car, talking to someone inside. When he saw me, he broke away from the car and started walking toward me, He didn't stop. He followed me, staying about 10 feet away, pacing my every step, spewing more of those filthy words. My stomach churned, dread tightening its grip. I was approaching a pizza place, so I darted inside, breathless, explaining to the girl at the counter that a man was following me. She let me stay, sent 2 male coworkers outside to look for him, but they came back empty-handed. I stayed inside for about 10 minutes before making my way to the bus stop. When I got there, 2 women were waiting, and when I told them what had happened, they stayed by my side, keeping me company until the bus arrived. He never followed me again, but the unease never fully left. That crawling, creeping feeling, it never really goes away. It was supposed to be a normal day at Walmart. My sister and I had just finished shopping, bags in hand, and wandered over to the small sitting area near the entrance of the mall to rest. We were debating whether to grab food when a tall, thin man approached us. He had pale blonde hair and was wearing a sickly yellow coat, his eyes hollow and unnerving. "Did you just get food?" he asked, his voice low and cold. We exchanged confused glances and I responded, "Yeah, why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he just stared at us, his eyes locked on mine, something dark swirling behind them. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. For a brief moment, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe that was it. But just as we were about to leave, he came back, his presence colder and more menacing than before. "God hates you," he hissed, his voice growing louder and more venomous. "You will be punished. You're both sinners." He was yelling now, his face twisted in anger, spitting words of doom and judgment at us. His finger jabbed the air, pointing at us like we were condemned, cursed for merely existing. People began to stop and watch, their eyes wide with curiosity, but no one stepped forward, no one offered to help. He kept going, louder and louder, his voice filling the air with threats of divine wrath. I grabbed my sister's arm, my pulse quickening. We had to get out of there. I stood, pulling her along with me, but before we could leave, he blocked our path, getting right in my face. His breath was hot and rancid as he screamed at us, and I could feel my skin crawl. Just then, another voice cut through the tension. "Dude, chill out. Leave them alone." A man standing nearby stepped forward. The guy in the yellow coat froze, looking around, eyes darting wildly. Then, without a word, he turned and stormed off. We didn't have time to breathe before a female mall cop approached us from behind, asking if we were okay, if we knew the man. We told her the obvious we didn't, but said we were fine, though my heart was still racing. We left the mall soon after, walking quickly, wanting to put as much distance between us and that nightmare as possible. But as we neared the parking lot, I heard it again, his voice, like a curse carried on the wind. "God will tell me where you live. I'll find you, and you'll pay for your sins." We never saw him again, but those words haunted me for months after, lingering in the back of my mind, like an unshakable shadow. That was a little over a year ago. Now I work the night shift at a smaller Walmart, the kind of place you'd expect to attract some strange characters. But surprisingly, it wasn't as bad as people would think. I worked maintenance, mostly tasked with collecting carts, which meant I often found myself alone in the vast, empty parking lot late at night. It was around 2 a.m. when I saw it. A van. Old, battered, and barely holding together. It pulled into the entrance between the Walmart and the closed dollar store next door. Its wheels screeched with each rotation, echoing through the otherwise silent lot. The van crept forward, rust flaking off the sides, until it finally came to a stop in the dollar store's parking lot, which was completely deserted. Something wasn't right. As I continued gathering carts, I couldn't help but steal glances at the van. The windows were dark, impossibly dark, and I couldn't see anyone inside. But the detail that really sent chills down my spine was the writing scrawled across the side of the van in faded purple spray paint. "Free children's bikes." I tried to focus on my job, but my eyes kept drifting back to that van, an oppressive sense of dread settling over me. The parking lot was empty, save for me and whatever or whoever was inside that van. I didn't hear a door open, no footsteps, no sounds of movement. It was just there, watching. I had to keep gathering carts, some of which were near the dollar store. Every step I took closer to that van, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. My hands trembled as I grabbed the carts, trying not to look in its direction, but the thought of what might be inside made my skin crawl. I never saw anyone get out of that van, but the whole time I felt like something unseen was just waiting. I knew I had to collect those carts. My manager wouldn't care if there was a creepy van lurking nearby. He'd just throw a fit if I wasn't doing my job. So I sucked it up and made my way across the dark parking lot toward the abandoned dollar store, where the carts had scattered. The van sat ominously still, its rusty exterior and the eerie words "Free Children's Bikes" painted on the side in purple spray. I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my spine. Just as I got close, the van's headlights flicked on, blinding me with their sudden brightness. Just as I got close, the van's headlights flicked on, blinding me with their sudden brightness. My heart leapt into my throat, convinced for a moment that the van was about to lunge forward and run me down. But it didn't. It stayed put, idling in silence, watching. I stood there, frozen like a deer caught in headlights, until I realized I probably looked like the weirdo staring at them. Maybe I was overreacting. So I hurried, grabbing the carts, sorting them as fast as I could, keeping my head down. But just as I was about to head back inside, I heard it, the slow, agonizing creak of the van's door opening behind me. I looked back, just for a second, and saw him. A man stepped out, his greasy black hair hanging limp around his face. His clothes were torn and filthy, like he hadn't changed in days. He was a mess. Worse, he was coming toward me. I bolted for the store, not wasting another second. At least inside, I'd be around other people, my co-workers. Safety in numbers, right? I mentioned the guy to my manager, but he just shrugged it off. Don't make a big deal out of it. Get back to work. I wasn't expecting sympathy, but it still stung. I grabbed a dust mop and returned to my usual duties, sweeping through the aisles, hoping to shake off the creepy feeling crawling under my skin. Most of the overnight staff were stocking shelves, so some aisles were bustling while others were eerily empty. 15 minutes into my shift, I turned the corner into the pet food aisle. And there he was, no cart, no items in hand, just standing there like he'd been waiting. His eyes locked onto mine, and it was clear he wasn't there for pet food. He shuffled toward me, his mouth moving, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. His words slurred together, a garbled mess that didn't make any sense. I asked him to repeat himself, but all I caught was something about someone who doesn't work here anymore. I didn't know what he was talking about. He just kept muttering, incoherent, his voice getting more frustrated. I told him he should speak to a manager, but that's when he screamed, "No!" It wasn't just a shout, it was a guttural, unhinged roar that echoed through the aisle. I backed away, ready to bolt, but he didn't follow. He just stood there, his eyes wild, before turning and slinking away, disappearing around the corner. The rest of my shift went on like nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. At 3 a.m. I finally clocked out for my break. I wasn't much of a people person, so I headed out to my car to eat in peace, as I always did. I leaned back across the seat, letting the cold glass of the driver's side window cool my head, trying to relax. But about 30 minutes into my break, that feeling crept back, the unmistakable sensation that I was being watched. I turned my head slowly, my pulse quickening, and there he was, standing right outside my driver's side window. His face was just inches from the glass, staring down at me with those dark, empty eyes. My heart skipped a beat, panic flooding my veins. What did this guy want? Was he following me because I'd looked at his van earlier? Every worst-case scenario ran through my mind in that instant. Thank God I always locked my doors. Without thinking, I started the engine, hands shaking, and slammed the car into reverse, peeling out of the parking lot. I didn't care where I went. I just needed to get out of there. I drove for about 20 minutes, aimlessly, trying to calm my racing thoughts. When I finally returned to the Walmart parking lot, I noticed the flashing red and blue lights before anything else. 3 or 4 police cars were surrounding the van, their sirens cutting through the night air. I went back inside, clocked in, and didn't see the guy anywhere. My manager told me a customer had called the cops about the van, and they'd finally come to check it out. I never saw that man again, but the nightmare stayed with me for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see his face pressed against my window, watching me. Thankfully, I landed an internship a few months later and was able to quit that job. But the nights never felt the same after that.